On This Week in Iowa, we're talking about a possible change to how judges are selected. Then Democrats have mixed feelings about the state education funding bill. Plus, a victims advocate group weighs in on felon voting rights. And we speak to a special guest of the State of the Union. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here on This Week in Iowa. I'm Sabrina Ahmed, and we are starting off our show once again on the couch with a discussion about the judicial nominating process. Representative Stephen Holt joins us now. Representative Holt, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here.
Okay, so there's a bill that would basically change the way Iowa judges get a position on the court. It was proposed and debated this week in a subcommittee. Can you explain to our viewers what this bill does?
Right. Well, it doesn't technically change how the judges or justices would be put on the bench, but what it does do is it changes how the individuals who are put on the commissions would be done.
Okay.
Currently, half of the commissioners are put on by 7,500 members of the bar who are not accountable to the people, and
by bar you mean State Bar Association, who are all attorneys.
Right. 7,500 members of the bar who are not, we don't believe accountable to the people, and we don't believe there's a lot of transparency there. So, our idea is to have those individuals selected by the elected representatives of the people in the House and Senate who are accountable either every 4 years or every 2 years to the people of Iowa.
Okay, so for our viewers at home who don't quite understand how this process works, how much of a change would this really be? How often are judges chosen, or how often do judges change? And what kind of judges does this apply to?
Well, obviously, judges need to be replaced when they retire or they come off the bench for some other reason. So we're talking about the Supreme Court, and we're talking about district court judges, associate district court judges. So how often they are, that transition would be necessary would depend on, obviously, when they leave the bench. So there is a state nominating commission which would deal with the Court of Appeals and with the Iowa Supreme Court, and then there's a nominating commission that deals with the district court. It is a change. We follow what's called a Missouri plan, which a number of other states have done as well, but a number of other states are also starting to look at moving away from that plan. Again, because the idea is that the elected representatives of the people are more accountable to the people in the process.
I spoke to the president of the Iowa State Bar Association a few weeks ago, Tom Levis, and he explained that why this was even put into place in the first place. So let's take a listen, because he says that this happened back when Senator Chuck Grassley was still in the legislature.
Right.
The governor, with his or her political influences, gets to select half the commissioners. The other half should be selected by the very people who are actually down there at the courthouse working with these judges who have special knowledge. And so that's why it was set up that way. And it was also to avoid over-politicizing the way we select our judges.
So what's your response to Tom Levis's point there, that lawyers are the people who are working with these judges day in and day out, and they should have a voice too in this process?
Well, first of all, the attorneys are not removed from the process at all. In fact, our legislation requires that at least half of those individuals that are put on the commissions must be attorneys. What we are removing is attorneys electing other attorneys to these commissions without any oversight whatsoever. And the idea that we're politicizing it, I don't think is accurate either. The system is already politicized. Anybody that works with the system knows that. We are 3 branches of government. There's politics always involved. So we don't believe we're politicizing it. We believe what we're actually doing is giving a voice to the people through their elected representatives.
Are you an attorney yourself?
No, I am not.
Under the proposed bill, what are the next steps in this proposal?
You're talking about in terms of the legislative process. So it has passed subcommittee, and this coming week on Wednesday, I believe we're looking at holding the hearing before the full committee. If it advances from the full committee, then it will be eligible for debate on the floor of the Iowa House.
And then it has to go through the whole process again on the Senate side.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here, Representative
Thank you.
Holt.
It's great to be here.
We'll continue to talk with you throughout this process and follow this along. So thank you so much.
Have a great day.
All right, let's take a short break, everyone. But coming up next, big news for Iowa educators. There's a bill in the State House that gives funding to K-12 schools early on in the process. We talked to a Democratic leader and hear what she thinks. Is this enough?
1 year ago, Local 5 introduced you to Yano.
I love you, buddy. Go have fun.
His strength facing opponents on the mat.
This one was first.
And his bravery battling leukemia. Monday.
Thought maybe you'd like to choose a courage beef.
I feel just like I do right before he wrestles. I just feel nervous. I just want it to be over with.
Experience the relief and joy as Yano's family celebrates a win.
This is it, for the last one.
His final chemo treatment.
Your family has just completed one of the most difficult trials you'll ever have to face.
Off the mat, Yano's victory, Monday at 10.
We really love the holidays at Graham Grahams, but it's tough to...
Relax.
The dish guy heard us. Said with the Dish Anywhere app, we could bring the comfort of our home TV along with us. Live TV, on demand, even our DVR shows.
Feel good shows.
That put us right at ease. Mostly.
So many eyes.
Take live TV, on demand, and your home DVR anywhere. Dish, tuned into you.
This station strives to provide quality children's programming in accordance with the requirements set by the Federal Communications Commission and by the Children's Television Act of 1990. WOI prepares a quarterly report which details our commitment to children's television. We invite the public to inspect these reports and comment on our efforts to provide for the educational and informational needs of the children in our community. These reports are available for public inspection at weareiowa.com.
Join us at the Des Moines Home and Garden Show. Check out today's schedule of exciting exhibits and guest speakers at the Inspiration Stage, designed by West End Architectural Salvage. For discounted tickets and show information, visit DesMoinesHomeandGardenShow.com.
From the capital city, you're watching This Week in Iowa with Sabrina Ahmed, getting to the heart of what's happening in Iowa politics.
Welcome back, everyone. We are joined now by Representative Karen Derry, a Democrat from Johnston. Representative Derry, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we want to talk about K-12 education funding.
Right.
Bills were proposed this week in both the House and Senate that would increase per pupil spending by 2.06%. So tell me, what are Democrats' reaction to this proposal?
Right. Well, you know, first off, it's good to see that it's more than what was offered last year. Last year was 1.1%, and you know, clearly that did not keep up with inflation. Democrats have proposed 3% this year, and we think that that is an appropriate level. We've been underfunding our public schools for almost a decade now, not been keeping up with inflation, so we think we need at least 3% to start making up some of that ground.
But 2%, as you mentioned, is better than 1%. So what do you believe will be, what do you think is going to happen with this proposal?
Well, it'll be interesting to see. We're debating on Monday night, and so, you know, Democrats are in the minority, and so that presents a challenge for getting our bills through. I hope that, you know, I hope that they'll look at 3%. I do think that that's the right amount for us to be spending. You know, what we're talking about with the 2.06% amounts to about $78 million, which is a lot of money, no doubt about it. But when we look at what Iowa lawmakers approved last year for a tax cut, there's $109 million in tax cuts for the top 1%. And so, you know, I think we do have the resources available if we want to prioritize.
I've often heard Republicans say, you know, we can't just throw money at education. Right. It's not just about money. It is also about having the right programs in place. So why do you believe that you need that 3% in order for schools to be adequately run?
Right, right. And I agree. It's not all about money. But I will say that we have world-class educators in the state. We have great schools. I think, though, that if we want to continue to be able to attract and retain high-quality teachers, we have to be competitive. And if we're not even keeping up with inflation, that's pretty difficult.
We spoke to Speaker Uppmeyer about her reaction and why she felt like this was an adequate amount of money.
Right.
So let's take a listen to what she had to say real quick.
Okay, great.
But it's $90 million going into education. I really hope we have support for that, because I think that's a big boon and a big investment in education.
So she said 90 million, you said 76 million. Where's the difference there?
Okay, well, I think I said 78, but
78.
Okay,
yes,
all right. That's the increase in SSA, and that's the allowable growth, and that's where, you know, we've seen the 1.1% last year. That's the 2.06% this year, and that again just isn't keeping up with inflation.
So then that additional money that she's referring to is also about transportation dollars and equality in transportation. And that's another bill that'll be debated on Monday night. So talk to me about that and what people at home need to know about that.
Well, I think it's important that, you know, we do have the opportunity for, you know, schools to have those extra transportation dollars as needed. But, you know, we also need the money for the allowable growth as well.
Okay, so you also sit on the Judiciary Committee at the House.
Yep.
You'll be debating sometime in the future the governor's bill over a felon's right to vote.
Yes.
That she wants it to be a constitutional amendment.
Yes.
Where do you stand on the language that's been proposed?
Well, I think I'm completely in favor of restoring felons' voting rights once they've paid their dues to society. We want as many people voting as possible. We want people to be engaged in our electoral process. So I'm very much in favor of it. I've seen some proposals about the need to pay restitution first, or for there to be a probationary period first, and you know, I think it's very, very important that when there's court-ordered restitution, that restitution be paid. But I don't think that should serve as a barrier to restoring felons' voters' rights. I think that puts too much of a burden on people who are in lower socioeconomic classes. And again, we want people involved. We want them voting.
So do you believe that as soon as maybe their probationary period set forth by the courts is over, that they should immediately have their rights to vote restored?
You know, I'm not sure if immediately is exactly the right word, but I am concerned about, you know, some sort of a limitation based upon, for example, paying all of their restitution. You know, I would not want to see those kinds of roadblocks set up.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It was nice to have you on This Week in Iowa.
Nice to be here.
We'll take a short break, everyone. We'll be right back.
Local 5's team of meteorologists track how the weather will affect you.
Mapping at street level, focusing in on your neighborhood. Pinpointing the weather at your kid's school so you know what to expect.
Street level mapping. Another reason Chief Meteorologist Brad Edwards and the Local 5 weather team are Iowa's most accurate. Congratulations to the Local 5 political team, awarded a regional Emmy for program Medicine in the Making. And congratulations to Local 5's Elias Johnson, awarded a regional Emmy for his work as a video journalist. To view these and other local stories you won't see anywhere else, go to weareiowa.com.
Legendary. Hit it. People can't get enough of stories. So long as the people in the stories are us.
It is wonderful to see you.
It is, isn't it?
What happens now determines what happens to the rest of the world.
Legendary.
Would you like Dr. Phil to try to help you?
In 17 seasons.
I'm only here because it was fun to cheer on Dr. Phil.
You've never seen
Get out of my face.
a guest.
What gives you permission to take a butcher knife out of the kitchen and chase somebody and threaten their life with it?
I was mad.
Like this.
I didn't say I was going to bring a gun. I said he's lucky he doesn't have a bullet through his head.
All new Dr. Phil.
Monday at 4 on Local 5.
You're watching This Week in Iowa, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Iowa.
Welcome back, everyone. We are joined now by Carl Schilling with the Iowa Organization for Victim Assistance. Carl, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Okay, so we are here to continue our discussion of felons' voting rights. As we just mentioned in our previous segment, an amendment was proposed by Governor Reynolds this session that would restore Iowa's felons' rights to vote, just so long as they've served their time their sentence is complete. You spoke at a hearing with lawmakers just this past week, and you say you're on the fence about your support for this legislation. Can you explain why?
Well, our emphasis is that whenever you're considering things like this, the victims of the crime should be considered. And some of the arguments for it indicate a lack of sympathy for victims, I think, or just a lack of awareness for them. For instance, the three most common reasons for doing this are usually lumped together, that the person made a mistake, they've done their time, and they've paid their debt to society. And the problem is that in many cases, none of these three things are true. You don't go to prison for a mistake. If you embezzle money, if you rape someone, these are not mistakes, they're crimes. And one of the victims that I know very well, when she hears someone refer to the murder of her relatives as a mistake or a poor decision in their past, it drives her crazy. So I'd like to eliminate that kind of language from it. As for serving time, most of them serve about a third. And as for paying your debt to society, I don't think you've paid your debt to society until you've paid your restitution. Having said that, I'm not, and Iowa is not necessarily opposed to voter rights being reinstated. But as things are currently, in order to get the right to vote, you have to pay the reinstatement. If the amendment goes through as they plan, this goes away. And it wasn't a strong or a rule that helped a whole lot of victims. It did help some. And it was important to those some. And we hate to see that given away without something to replace it. And what we want is recognition that restitution is an issue. And if it's not going to be, it doesn't have to be a bar to voting, but we do want it in the mix of the conversation.
But do you, so kind of along those same lines, isn't that some sort of discrimination to people who don't have as much money as others?
Yes, but you can have a plan on a sliding scale. There are some people who get restitution and it's 50 cents a month. And the person who gets it says, yes, it's not very much money, but every time I get that money, I know the person is reminded of what he did and is taking some responsibility for it.
What do you believe Iowans at home are thinking, gosh, I'm not a felon, I don't know a felon. What should they know about this amendment as it's going through the process?
That it's more a matter of civil rights, rather. I think people make a mistake when they try to make it a matter of do they deserve to have a vote or not. Some do, some don't. Some people have learned, they've learned from their experience, they're ready to go out, they're ready to be responsible. Others, not so much, and some people get out of prison and they're still pretty scary. So I don't think merit is a defense for this kind of thing. It's better to say something like, you're a citizen and your rights aren't contingent on behavior. I think that's a better argument. I'll just give it to them.
All right, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your time. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Are you pouring money down the drain?
Well, I just got my wireless bill.
You can switch for free to U.S. Cellular.
Really?
And get a free phone when you switch.
Free phone? Huh.
Plus get payback for data you don't use with the Unlimited with Payback plan.
No way. All that money wasted at the wrong provider.
Right now at U.S. Cellular, there's no trade-in required to get a free Samsung Galaxy S9. Just switch to U.S. Cellular.
At Local 5 on your side means answers to your questions.
And we're just doing the stories that the community wants us to do, to empower you with something as a viewer that you can move forward with.
What drives these people to go above and beyond and be exceptional Iowans? That's stuff we can all use in our own lives.
To be able to be that line of connection for people is huge to them. And they can reach out to Local 5, and they're going to get answers.
We are Iowa, and it's everything to me.
In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jong-un.
The president.
Do you trust him? I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange.
Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working out?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying?
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington. A very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News. Straightforward.
You're watching This Week in Iowa, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Iowa.
Welcome back, everyone. We're finishing off our program with Peggy Huppert, who's the executive director of NAMI Iowa, a mental health organization here in our state. Peggy, you've been on our show multiple times. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
This time, we are not necessarily talking about NAMI and what NAMI is doing in the state of Iowa, because you were the special guest in Washington, D.C. of Representative Cindy Axne at the State of the Union. And so that's what we're here to talk about. Take a look at this photo. You were personally invited by the Congresswoman. Axne said that she chose you because of her priorities in Congress. One of them is to improve the quality of health care, especially mental health. So tell us, what was that experience like?
It was very cool. I was up for 20 straight hours on Tuesday, and I was very tired and sore at the end of the day, but it was a wonderful experience, and I'm really glad I was able to do it.
So it's not just actually going to the State of the Union. It's
No.
A big day of kind of pomp and circumstance involved as well. So talk to me about what that is like and who you got to meet while you were there.
Well, I flew in early that morning, so I got up at 5 o'clock and flew in, and actually Cindy and I were on the same plane together. And I started my time on Capitol Hill with doing an interview in the House recording studio, which was, I've never been to that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And all these members of Congress and their staffs were out in the waiting room and out in the hallway waiting to get studio time because they were all recording things related to the State of the Union. So it was a very busy place, and it was cool. I got to meet people there. And then I went to some of the other congressional offices, and then I just hung out in their office until we went over to the Capitol. And it was, then even just in the tunnel walking over to the Capitol, we met lots of members. And I said I had my first experience with moving around the Capitol with a member of Congress. It's completely different.
I bet it is.
They've got this lapel pin that signifies they're a member, and that's what security and law enforcement are looking for. If you're with a member, you can go anywhere, and you bypass all the lines. You know, it's just kind of like magic. So we met a lot of people in the tunnel, and then we went to the floor briefly, and then we went to Speaker Pelosi's office for a reception, which was, and then I got to meet dozens more members. I said it was kind of a surreal experience meeting all these people who you've seen on television and you know their names, but you've never met them, and you're meeting them in rapid succession. And that was, and of course, a lot of people were interested to talk to me because I'm from Iowa. Right. And, you know, presidential nominating process, but also because of my role with NAMI. Cindy mentioned everyone that I worked with NAMI, and I had a lot of nods of recognition. I heard personal stories of mental health challenges. And actually one member said to me, you know, I've gotten really involved with the NAMI in my state and advocating, and she said, and then she told me a story, and she said, I never would have talked about this 5 years ago, but things are different now. So that was great to hear. Do you feel like when the president talked about things like opioid addiction,
and those impacts on mental health, or mental health and those impacts on the opioid addiction. Did you feel like there was a stress on mental health in the State of the Union? Was it enough?
Well, not for me, but there's a lot that still needs to be done. And from our perspective, one of the major points is maintaining the Affordable Care Act and protection for people with pre-existing conditions, because a major pre-existing condition is our mental health disorders, and also Medicaid expansion, because that's very important to people with serious mental illness. So those are our areas of emphasis.
And one other quick thing, I do just want to get your take on the whole idea of restoring felons' right to vote, because we've had so many guests on so far today talking about it. What is NAMI's perspective on that?
Well, we do have a national perspective on it, and I'll just speak personally. About 50% of inmates right now have at least one diagnosed serious mental illness. And a lot of the reason for certain crimes being committed is an underlying mental illness. That doesn't excuse it, but it's an explanation. And for 92% of people in prison are going to get out of prison. So we need to make sure that they can be successful citizens, and part of that is getting treatment for their mental illness. But there's just to say that there are a lot of ex-offenders and ex-felons who live with serious mental illness. That's part of the mix to be considered.
Yeah, Bert, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You bet.
Short break. We'll be right back.
Mrs. Lake teaches her second graders ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and nickels, dimes, and quarters. As a teacher and a mom, Mrs. Lake relies on American Trust to provide her kiddos an early start to money smarts. American Trust teaches students to save and provides grade-level lessons and online resources. Personal advice and financial solutions make American Trust the right answer for Mrs. Lake, too. Whether you're 8 or 80, trust American Trust, because it's all about you.
On our We Are Iowa app, we have the greatest interactive radar. Not only do you see the radar now, but you also have the interactive part where you can look at future radar.
You can't catch our newscast if you're out and about.
You can be the meteorologist, so to speak. You can zoom in on the map and let yourself know when that storm's going to arrive. Honestly, I'm not just saying this because it's ours, but it's the best radar I've ever seen.
We are Iowa, and it's everything to me.
How you doing today?
I have a good feeling about you.
Okay, let's see what you got.
Thank you so much for joining us here on This Week in Iowa. We want to thank our guests for sharing their perspectives on education, felon voting rights, mental health, and the judicial nominating process. We hope to see you all again next Sunday. Have a great rest of your weekend.